It's Wednesday, 6 o'clock. Got a full NBA slate. Let's take a heat check. This is Heat Check presented by BetMGM and the Action Network. I'm Matt Moore, senior NBA writer for the Action Network, joined by Preston Johnson of Bets TV. We're going to be breaking down the Wednesday schedule, everything that you need to know to bet the NBA night, sides, props, totals, where the money's at, the public, all sorts of fun stuff for you in this show. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Let's get started. Off the top, Preston, we saw a big battle in the Western Conference last night between the Suns and the Warriors.
Yeah.
A great game between those two. Another rematch on Friday, although probably without Devin Booker. But I want to talk to you about the Eastern Conference because I still think that when we look at where the value is, I think there might be more value in the East. The West is obviously going to have a bunch of teams that tough teams are going to have to go through, whereas the East is I think, a little bit more top heavy when we look at the actual title odds there. So if I'm looking for value in the Eastern Conference, I have to tell you, I am going to go with the Milwaukee Bucks at still 3-1. I think that's great value considering where the Bucks are at. You know, the books are not fooled by this slow start for Milwaukee because of all the injuries that they had. They're without Brook Lopez still. They're without Drew Holiday and Chris Middleton at one point, and Dante DiVincenzo and Bobby Portis getting a little bit healthier as it goes along. Grayson Allen's giving them a boost, and Giannis still looks like a wrecker of worlds. You know, when I look at the Eastern Conference, I just don't know if anybody can really get in the way of Giannis. I don't trust the Nets defense. I'm not confident in the Sixers and Joel Embiid to, one, handle the season's rigors, and then two, be able to handle double teams in the playoff environment. We've seen him struggle with that before. And outside of that, I'm not sure I'm sold on any of the other teams, including Miami after the hot start. Is there anybody in the Eastern Conference that you like better than Milwaukee at 3-1 to win the East?
From a price perspective, and we talked briefly before we went on air officially, but like the Bucks at 3-1 relative to like the plus 140 price for the Nets, I absolutely agree with you. They've just been kind of getting by all of these injuries, but I believe Milwaukee's won 7 straight now and kind of hitting their stride, and they still don't even have Brook Lopez back. So I'm with you in that regard. Just to win the East at that price is actually value. But if there's a team that pays better than that could do something with the player that hasn't played yet for them, it's the Sixers at 10-1. That ceiling is just, the uncertainty of the ceiling exists, but that's also why at 10-1 it might be an extremely interesting and intriguing price, because what does Ben Simmons turn into? If it turns into 0 and he's not even playing, I'm totally dead wrong and I'll look foolish. But if it turns into actual value, I'm not even going to try to like spread rumors or name names, but they've been throwing around plenty already this season. That's a huge uptick for the Sixers that are already a team that's slightly above average with dealing with COVID for 2 weeks and having a kind of their own similar Milwaukee Bucks situation where they haven't been 100% healthy regardless anyways to this point. So add an all-star or add like 3 to 4 really strong role players, something to that mix with waivers. 10-1, it's enticing to me. Look, it's also Joel Embiid. You made the point about the double teams. But if you had like, all right, I'm going to drop a name, Damian Lillard on the other side, up top, well, that might help a little bit. Maybe they can't double Embiid anymore, and things get a little more interesting. So from that, just kind of trying to gauge and price the uncertainty of what happens with Ben Simmons and the Sixers, I think that number is still too high. Just because I think there's potential there where they're in that mix with the Nets and the Bucks, and the price is 3, 4, 5-1. And I'm with you though. Heat ultimately, and they've been dealing with their own injuries. The Bam news today, we'll see where they end up. The Bulls, it's been a fun story, but they're not a title contender. The Knicks, the Wizards, they're not winning anything. So Bucks and Sixers, I think those are the two best bets, just because the Nets, tough to see where they're going to be at with Kyrie and everything on their end come playoff time too.
Bucks in Sixers. I like it. I like that choice there for you. Let's get to our best bets for the evening, sides and totals. Reminder that everything that you find here can be tracked in the Action Network app, the absolute best way for you to track your bets. You can get information on where the money's coming in versus the bets, track line movement, get analysis, track your futures, everything. And the award-winning Action Network app, which you can find on your mobile device right now. Preston, you're up first. What's your best bet of the evening?
So I will preface with this. 2 weeks ago, we didn't do a heat check, or at least I wasn't on one for the Thanksgiving week. 2 weeks ago, the Oklahoma City Thunder were hosting the Rockets. The line was -2.5. I thought OKC should have been closer to 4. That was the best bet. They took care of business. People see the same exact line, same exact situation today. And just if they're wondering if it's going to be OKC, it's not. But there's a couple key differences that I think just contextually for bettors that watched the show 2 weeks ago, watching now, I wanted to throw out there. One, Kevin Porter Jr. is playing for the Rockets. That was a piece that he was no longer playing for Houston at that time. Giddey is out for OKC. I think Darius Baisley's also questionable, and Muscala is also out. Whether or not he's actually a factor for the Thunder, that's a different argument. And the Rockets are coming off 3 straight wins. So my projection from 2 weeks ago, look, the Rockets actually project to be a slightly better team than they were 2 weeks ago. And so I'm staying away. I actually think it's fair tonight, which is just interesting to see how things can change over 2 weeks. Same exact teams playing the same exact arena. Now for my best bet, the Mavs, -3.5, a team that, I've thought has been slightly undervalued in the market at times throughout the season. This is one, some of the markets at 4, there's plenty of 3.5s. That's a pretty big difference. My projection isn't quite as high as 5. It's 4.8 on average, but at 3.5, it's a worthwhile bet. And ultimately, it's the Pelicans being one of the worst teams in the NBA, which is like, hey, they just upset the Jazz on the road. They just upset the Clippers on the road. It's true. They're still a bottom 5 defense in the NBA, still a bottom 5 offense in the NBA. And if you want to talk about one of the least likely players probably in the history of the NBA to make 7 3-pointers in a half on 7 attempts, it's probably Jonas Valanciunas. And that's what he did, and that's why they beat the Clippers the other night. Probably some regression there, or if he's somehow now, Dirk Nowitzki, I'm totally wrong here. The Pelicans are, going to win it all, and we probably should have been talking about their futures at like 1,000 to 1 or whatever the price is. So for me, it's mostly that I think the market's a little low on Dallas. Probably some regression coming home from a couple of weird games where they beat Utah on the road because Utah shot like 8% from 3. And then they had the Valanciunas 7 for 7 from 3 in 1/2 game against the Clippers. Little overreaction. Got to go with Dallas.
Yeah, I mean, it's a small number. I get it. I'm a little surprised the number is this short, just based off of the fact of where the Pelicans are at. I get that, they've been all over the streak. I still kind of lean a little bit towards New Orleans. And the reason is just, I really think that this Mavs team is fraudulent, Preston. I just genuinely, when you look at it as a home favorite this season, 3-5 against the spread, but more importantly, just when you dig into anything that is contextualized against their opponents, the numbers come out as pretty concerning. They are 17th in adjusted offensive rating and 23rd in adjusted defensive rating at dunksandthrees.com, 21st overall in net rating. They have the biggest differential between expected wins and actual right now. I think that it's interesting that the market is kind of like buying into that concept. The Mavs maybe you're getting them low here. It is a Pelicans team that just got this big win over LAC. I like the spot for Dallas. I can't hate that. I'm pretty much at the point where if I see Dallas as a favorite, I'm just tempted to kind of go the other way based off of they do not look connected. The defense is regressing. And I'm not sure that, where I'm going with this. Like, I just don't trust the coaching to give them enough of an edge night to night to feel confident about it. However, at 3.5, it's hard for me to argue with that number.
Let me add one thing, because you're right. We talked about it preseason. I even asked you, how many wins to the season win total is Jason Kidd worth from Rick Carlisle? And you're like, maybe 4 wins, I think was your response. And I was like, yeah, that's probably right. And then I find myself during the season, game to game, trying to make excuses as to why the Mavs are undervalued. Yet I agreed with your Jason Kidd take before the season. So I probably should have just shut up at that point. We bet the Dallas Mavs season wins under and hopefully cash that one and then stayed away from these game to games. But I just, my model sees value. So that's why I'm jumping in. But you could just be right. The Jason Kidd drop-off's too extreme.
Yeah, I think more probably what's happening is my models based off of half court and transition numbers is wrong, because I've got this much closer to a pick 'em than you. So for my pick, my best bet of the night, I am taking the Minnesota Timberwolves. No half measures tonight, Preston. I'm going on the money line plus 165. Ow! Okay. My Wolves, I bet they were my best bet for season win total for their over. I bet them consistently this season, especially on unders, because the market is still, for some reason, the market is still kind of like, oh, this is that same bad Wolves defense. The problem is, like, the Wolves will have like one game where they give up like 120, and it kind of masks how good night to night their defense has been. The Wizards, though, are 20th in adjusted offensive rating. Like, their numbers under the hood, much like the Mavericks, are actually pretty bad. And the Wizards have been really trailing the last couple of weeks, honestly, in offense. They have the 24th toughest offensive strength of schedule. What that means is they face a very soft schedule in terms of the defenses that they've gone up against. That's boosted up their overall offensive rating. Minnesota, meanwhile, is 8th in offense, 3rd in defense the last 2 weeks overall via cleaning the glass. Here's a big key. The Wizards have the 7th fewest transition plays per game. They don't get out and run. They don't get easy baskets. Okay. The Wolves play an aggressive style, and I do think the Wizards will have some success in that spot. But I think that with where Minnesota's offense has been trending, the kind of firepower that they have, how Anthony Edwards is playing, how D'Angelo Russell, quite honestly, has been playing, factor in how good Minnesota is against transition. They're really good at shutting down transition. So you have the Wizards that don't do it a lot, but when they do it tonight, they're unlikely to generate a lot of points per possession on those marks. Those little edges add up. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm take the Wolves as a dog plus 165 tonight.
I can't hate it. I actually do have the number lower. If I was going through my sides, depended on the Miles Turner. Hawks or Pacers was one that was in the mix, Mavs, and then my other one was the Wolves that I think got as high as plus 4.5 earlier today. I was surprised to see that.
Yeah, I've got this as I've got the Wolves as favorites, so that's one of the reasons I'm on the money line. It's like my numbers have this actually as the Wolves as a favorite. So we'll hope that the Wolves come through for me yet again. Been very helpful for me the last couple of weeks after a frustrating few weeks, including a Memphis game that is going to go down in history as one of my most brutal bets of the season, where they failed to cover +6 in overtime. That was a rough one. Let's go to the wheel every week on Heat Check, presented by BetMGM. We select a number of props pregame. We don't know which one we're going to get, and we choose randomly. We have to prep for all of them, and whichever one we land on, we got to go over or under. Preston, are you ready for the wheel?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's hit it for Preston Johnson on the prop wheel on Heat Check. Okay. You know what? I'm taking this one. I'm going to take this one from you. I'm going to steal this one from you. I'm stealing this one from you. I'm not letting you do this. I'm taking it. It's Kevin Porter Jr. I'm going over 1.5 3-pointers. I want this from you. I'm sorry. I am exercising my right as host of the show to steal this from you. This is my number one pick of all the ones that we had. He's gone over 1.5 3-pointers in 2 or more. Or he's at 2 or more in 10 of 17 games. So he's gone over this line in 10 of 17 games this season. The big change here is that the Rockets have adjusted and moved Daniel Tice out of the rotation. That's opened everything up. They're playing much more stretch 5. Christian Wood's able to stretch out to the 5. They have a lot more spacing, and that means there's more room for them to drive. Christian Wood's been a willing passer. He's gotten a lot of assists on 3-pointers. You're going to see probably a higher 3-point rate with the Rockets overall. And then here's a big key. They're playing the Thunder tonight, which, as you mentioned, the Thunder give up the most points per game to guards on 3-pointers in the league. So if you add up all the points per game off of guards, the Thunder give up the most per game. Kevin Porter Jr. should get a lot of opportunities. I am taking the over 1.5 on the Rockets. Preston, are you ready for your turn on the wheel? I promise I'll let you have it.
Yeah, if you want this one too. I mean, that sounded
just
good.
Keep going. We'll just keep spinning. I'll just keep adding on to my bets. You ready?
Yep, go for it.
All right, let's spin the wheel for Preston. PJ Tucker, points, rebounds, and assists, 14.5. What do you think?
That's okay. It's too low. I'm going to play over. We're going to go 2 overs for these props today.
Okay.
The Bam news is the main thing, which is why it's an intriguing look. He averages 14.5 anyways on the season. What's interesting is backup center Dwayne Dedman is questionable. He has a right knee contusion. And I don't think, unless it was announced in the last 15 minutes since we went live, he may not even play. And now they're playing a Cavs team that's been starting really big. Jared Allen at center, Lauri Markkanen at power forward. Evan Mobley's been playing the 3. We're going to need to see a lot of PJ Tucker. And on top of that, Jimmy Butler was just, I think, confirmed out a bit ago. And so PJ Tucker might play 40-plus minutes. He gets to 14.5 on quite a bit less. I just have to go with it. Feel bad for Bam, feel bad for the Heat because they did start hot. And it was a team that I thought, preseason, their price relative to the Bucks and the Nets was in the mix of worthwhile, and they just kind of seem to be going the other direction. And so hopefully they can get healthy, and by the playoffs they're in good shape to make them fun. But I got to take advantage here. I think the Tucker number is too low at 14.5.
I am a little concerned that he's just going to fall over with exhaustion. This is a lot of minutes for a guy.
A lot of fouls. Yeah, that's the downside. Yeah,
that's PJ's going to be tired. He's going to need a nice warm bath when he gets home tonight. This is going to be an exhausting game, especially versus that big front line of the Cavs. But I don't hate it just because The Heat don't have any options. That's where they're at with so many injuries
Yep.
And inability. And you know what? In the games where they've been shorthanded, Tucker's actually taken a bigger role. You saw that consistently in games where, especially when Butler was out, actually, they sent Tucker a lot more actually inside trying to get scoring opportunities. So I think you're probably going to see that as well tonight. Just the usage opportunity, I think, is huge there for him. Can't hate that one. All right, final segment. Old Axiom in betting says that you got to fade the public, because the idea is that you don't know anything. Now, our users that we ask this poll of every week, pretty sharp folks, as you would imagine from anyone that follows Action Network and is watching this show. But we're going to go ahead and test that theory and see exactly how much you know. We asked you on Twitter. This is a game that I find really fascinating. What's your best bet for tonight's Hornets and Bucks game? One thing that I think that is really interesting is, okay, so the Bucks are a 9-point favorite versus a Hornets team that has been inconsistent, but largely kind of surprisingly good this season. It's a big number. The Bucks have historically done well, but they haven't done, they've still without Brook Lopez, a little banged up. The total in this is also fascinating. It's 230.5. We don't have a lot of 230s this season, especially after the first 2 weeks of the season. You haven't seen many of those games because of how much the offenses have struggled. Unders were just hitting constantly. Now, last week on Action Network, we did a piece from Austin Wang talking about how the overs have translated into a first winning week last week. And I think we're probably going to see a repeat of that this week. But it's interesting to see that 230.5 number, which is why you came in with your results. And the public says the best bet is the under at 230.5. So Preston, I ask you, are you with the people and going to go under against this big number relative to what the market's been this season? Or are you going to go a different direction and fade the public?
I'm with the people, and I wasn't anticipating this. Look, you look at the last 3 games, if you've been following the NBA and you've been following the Hornets, in regulation, because there was an overtime game that went into they scored 280 something points. In regulation, on average, the Hornets' last 3 games have totaled 257 per game. Just in regulation. So now you're like, oh, they're going up against the Bucks. This is insane. We have to, go with Milwaukee. Hornets can't play defense. Everything that's happening there. It's also still just 3 games. It's one of those that with a personal projection, is closer to 228. I'm not overreacting to a 3-game sample. It's ugly and painful, and I wouldn't actually bet it unless it got to 232. It's not. So at 230.5, though, that's the direction I have to go. And I'm surprised that was the most popular pick. But hopefully the Bucks can just lock the Hornets down and they don't score 150 themselves.
Yeah, so one of my bets on the evening is going to be the Hornets team total under at 110, because the Bucks match up very well on they are one of the best teams at defending spot ups. But the reason I can't go with the under here, and I am going to go Bucks -9 and fade the public, is because the Hornets they last season had a lot of success switching. Their changes in personnel have made that very difficult. They have not been nearly as good switching this season. They've gone to more zone, which can help, but unfortunately for them, oh, look at that. The Bucks are the 11th best team in the NBA versus the zone. So I just don't think that the Hornets can get enough stops. And I think it's possible that the Bucks put up a big number here, which can bust the total over. But I do want to go ahead and go with, I'll take Bucks -9, but more specifically, I want to trust that the Hornets won't be able to get over 110 versus what I think is a resurgent and very good and very serious Bucks defense. So I will go Bucks -9, even though I do lean towards the under as well. I'm worried about that, the Bucks putting up a big number on
And
Charlotte.
to add, I forgot to mention it, during the 7-game win streak the Bucks are on, I believe they grade out as the best defensive rating over those 7 games. They haven't played anyone very good. You can adjust for schedule some, but regardless, their defense, you're right about that 100%. Finally stepping up kind of to what we've seen past Bucks teams the last few years.
Dynamite drop there, Preston. To recap tonight's picks, which you can find again in the Action Network app, there's actually a heat check. You can follow that heat check on the app right there. Preston's got Mavs -3.5. I've got the Wolves money line. +165. Preston has got PJ Tucker over 14.5 points, rebounds, and assists. I've got Kevin Porter Jr. over 1.5 3-pointers. Preston likes the under 230.5 along with the people. I am going to go instead with Bucks -9. This has been Heat Check presented by BetMGM. Make sure to track all your picks in the Action Network app. Download and subscribe to all of our great podcasts and check out all of everything we've got at actionnetwork.com. We'll see you guys again next week for another edition of Heat Check presented by BetMGM.